Welcome back to the channel, Adventures Through Climate Change. I'm Trevor Snyder, I'm your host, and we're going to figure out what the heck climate change is, what our role is in it, what to expect in the future, how much fear-mongering is actually involved, should we throw more money at it, and all the questions involved that I didn't mention, right? There's a lot of things with climate change. There's a lot of opinions, there's a lot of science, and there's a lot of inferences based on that science. And we're just breaking stuff down. We're just breaking it down. So today's video, and we are doing an armchair search, meaning I'm not going out there into the climate. I'm sitting armchairs, watching videos, reading scripts online. And most of the stuff that I'm posting are videos because they're more entertaining for you and for me and the entire human race. Okay. Don't copyright me on that. London cleaned up its air pollution. Delhi can too. DW Planet A, we watched one of theirs a while ago. Man, I must have been on my other. Normally I'm on my other account when I'm actually watching the videos. But we'll see what they have to say. This is London's smog used to be as toxic as the air in cities like Delhi, Beijing, and Jakarta today. So, and I talked about this in another video with San Francisco. When I grew up, we either had fog or smog, and I had a view of the bay, San Francisco Bay, and I could not see it because of either the fog or the smog. And when I went years back later, there's obviously days that the fog's so bad you can't see it, but the smog issue, it was completely different. Now they have other dirty issues on their streets that they need to clean up and figure stuff out. That's for another video. We're looking at climate change. So with this one, let's bust it up here and get to listening.
Fog everywhere. Fog up the river where it flows among greenates and meadows. Fog down the river where it rolls defiled among the tears
Fog
of
or
shipping
smog?
and the waterside pollutions of a great and dirty city.
Cities are dirty. Humans are dirty.
These words weren't written about Delhi or Jakarta or Beijing. No. This is how Charles Dickens described the filthy air in London, back when he wrote the novel Bleak House more than 150 years ago.
It was a descriptor.
And he wasn't the only one struggling to breathe. Now, London still looks pretty grey. But it used to be even more polluted than cities across India are today.
Oof, that's horrible.
There's a couple of weeks in winter where there's like a wall of smoke. And so you see it.
This matters because air pollution is one of the biggest killers in the world.
Every year we have 7 million premature deaths caused by exposure to air pollution. I mean, I think this gives you an idea of the terrible public health risk we are confronting here.
That lady doesn't look Indian.
Satellite images show particulate concentrations in 2019 were greatest across Asia and Africa. The air in Europe, meanwhile, has gotten much safer. So what can London's past teach Asian cities today?
Buffers on the stacks.
The World Health Organization calls air pollution a silent killer. Every breath we take contains invisible particles and gases that together knock 2 to 3 years off our lives. These harm the lungs and lead to diseases like asthma and lung cancer.
But those particles, the PM, the particulate matter, they are so small, so teeny, that they go everywhere. The smallest ones, they will go into our bloodstream. And then from there, obviously, they can affect any system, any part of our body.
What people don't realize is that includes your heart and even your brain.
They realize it.
Even the IQ. What are we doing? Now we're putting at risk the IQ of the new generation. You have been exposed to an incredible level of pollution, and that will reduce your capacity to develop, and that is totally unacceptable.
One of the biggest barriers is that many governments consider air pollution a necessary evil, however many people get sick. Air pollution rises when countries industrialize, and cities across Asia have developed like London did back during the Industrial Revolution.
Cool.
When workers burned coal to power engines, they released particles that stained shirts and shocked writers like Dickens.
Smoke lowering down from chimney pots, making a soft black drizzle with flakes of soot in it as big as full-grown snowflakes.
Dickens's descriptions stayed valid for
It'd be
decades
horrible.
to come.
I mean, I'm not...
The amount of raw sewage at the time was so great that Victorian London experienced the Great Stink. A century later, the pollution caused the Great Smog, which officials at the time estimate killed 4,000 people in a week. Now, this made life as horrible as it sounds. The fog was so dense that it stopped trains, shuttered shops, and even helped thieves prowl in the dark. And that's all before you factor in the cost to health. Londoners died from lung diseases like bronchitis in greater numbers as the air got worse. At the peak of the pollution, the health damage alone is estimated to have cost up to 20% of British GDP. The bad news is that Delhi's air today is pretty much as bad as London's was a century ago. And like in London, that cost lives.
We're smoking about 7 cigarettes a day on average in Delhi, in North India. And in the winter, it goes up to, about 20 cigarettes. Now, the thing that is really awful about that is that a newborn child is smoking that many cigarettes a day. My children smoked 2,500 cigarettes last year. And that is shattering.
Knowing the scale of the damage puts parents in an impossible bind.
Mothers in India are very famous for being very protective of our children. And you just feel so completely helpless that, my goodness, this is happening to my children and I can't do anything about it.
Delhi's air gets extra bad in winter because...
She even had a little bike helmet, a little kid's bike helmet in her background. And maybe it was her bike helmet. It was a little blue one, so I guess I assumed it was her son's or something. That is something to be said. It's not their fault. Little kids, babies, not their fault. They haven't had a chance to add to the issues yet. They'll get plenty of chances, hopefully.
Farmers in surrounding states burn crops, and the cold air traps the smoke that blows over. But much of urban India's pollution has come from burning more coal and driving more cars.
When I grew up in Mumbai in the 80s and 90s, having a car was an incredibly a luxury item. Very few families had a car. And in the last 20 years, with liberalization and globalization taking place in India, cars have become very commonplace. And so everybody has a car. And these are not held to the same standards as cars in the US and Europe.
Scientists say air quality first gets worse as countries industrialize and use more energy, but then after a while, the costs become too high to ignore, and they invest in solving the problem. That's how Britain fixed it over the course of a century. The government moved factories out of cities, brought in a Clean Air Act to find companies belching out poisons, and replaced coal cookers with gas. It built parks and public transport networks that reduced reliance on cars. And in doing so, they showed critics of environmental regulations that saving lives also means saving money.
There's something to be said about it. I mean,
this argument about the fact that if you want to develop economically, you need to destroy the environment, and by destroying the environment, destroying my lungs, is not correct.
But Europe still hasn't fully solved it. Outdoor air pollution today still causes 400,000 early deaths in Europe each year. People in the poorest parts of cities often live close to factories and roads thick with pollutants. And because Europe has exported a lot of its manufacturing to factories in Asia, it's exported some of its air pollution too. So, what can urban India take away from this? Authorities are tightening fuel standards and, in some cities, closing power stations and restricting when you can drive cars. India is also looking next door to the progress made in China. After President Xi Jinping declared war on pollution, Beijing reduced its levels of fine particles by 35% in just 5 years from 2013. The UN called it an enormous investment of time, resources,
that's pretty
and
good,
political
though.
will. But in cities across India, the air is clearing too slowly to celebrate. And until the government
Populations
tackles
grown
the
so much.
sources of pollution, residents are forced to live their lives around it. That's why Darius Rathod makes HEPA filters, to block toxic particles coming in from outside. These air purifiers start off white.
like say this is like in 1 week, this is something it looks like within a month. Then if you use further, this is what you get. This is the pollution what you breathe in Delhi. This filter has been used for more than 3 months.
Without solving the causes of air pollution, filters like these just reduce
Change your
the
filters
effects
monthly.
of the problem.
This goes for people across the world, in my opinion. Change your filters monthly, at least. It depends on your area. It depends on what's going on. In dry times, we get a lot more wind, a lot more dirt in the filters. We have to change them more regularly. There's times that it's not that way. Just know, because you're not only breathing all that stuff in, you're making your system work harder. And by system, I mean your furnace, also your system.
I'm lucky enough and privileged enough that I have air purifiers in every room in my house. We try to manage it very carefully. First, we protect our children as much as we can afford to, and then we go out to fight, because that's just a mother's instinct.
But with so many successful examples to learn from, Indian cities now need to scale solutions up to bring their pollution down. And if they're really stuck for ideas, well, they could do worse than going out and planting a tree. If you liked what you saw, then hit subscribe. We've got new videos coming out every Friday about these environmental crises shaping our lives.
I enjoy DW Planet A. I think they seem to be unbiased. They seem to just distribute their facts on what they are doing their science work on, and it's interesting stuff. I don't find very many things to disagree with, to be quite honest. I do think air pollution is one of those things, as human beings, we are going to have to figure out. And me being in the United States, we've had 20, 30 years to really get on top of that with the stacks and the buffers and the filters and whatnot. Not to say it's still not a problem, right? But India and China, despite all their efforts, I know they were saying India needs to be more like China. Despite all those efforts, they're still like the number one air polluters, I think, in the world right now, right? Maybe India took them over, but I'm pretty sure China's up there. They're 1 and 2. And that's has to do with, gosh, what, 3 to 4 billion people just in those two countries. So pretty impressive. With that being said, they did mention how ingenuity comes into play. That guy made a business on HEPA filters because there's a need. So whenever there's a need, whenever there's a problem, there's people there to solve the problem. And that maybe it's not the most efficient way, but I believe in life that is what we do as human beings. And I think we need to also keep that into account and not freak out all the time with, Chicken Little, the sky is falling type thing. But anyways, with that being said, I hope I earned your subscription. If not, I hope to in the future. And if I earned your subscription already, or if I didn't, if you like the video, like it or dislike it, but lay down a comment. Let me know what I should watch in the future. What should we be talking about with climate change? And if there's any comedies out there. I love the comedies because there's so much truth in them. With that also being said, we'll catch you on the next video.